right, I'm here at the Danbury Democratic headquarters here, and I'm here with Larry Riefberg, who is the new chairperson for Danbury Democrats. And I'm very happy you're giving me an opportunity to speak to you today. I've been following the Democratic Party for quite some time. I think we talked about the previous chairs here, and I followed the matters here in this town since around 2003. So we're talking, let me see if I can do it right here. It'd be Bernie Gallo, then Joe Da Silva, and then Lynn Tabersack, and then Joe Da Silva again, then Joe Walkovich, then Jean Eriquez, and then Andrea Gartner, and you.
Yes, indeed.
All right, there, good. My memory's
that was
going
after
back.
I was here for 6 years as chair.
There you go. In fact,
So during the Eriquez
let's get into the whole thing.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about yourself for people who don't know you.
First of all, it's a pleasure, Alan. Thanks for having me. Born in Danbury. Lived here all my life except for college and law school. Went to Haystown Avenue School, Broadview Junior High School, they called it then. It's now middle school, Danbury High School. On to Tufts University and then University of Connecticut School of Law, and then came back to Danbury and began a practice of law with my dad, who became a Superior Court judge in 1985. So this year I celebrated 40 years in practice, and I turned 65 in January. And
Oh,
I
you look great.
Thank you. I figured I had the time, the energy, and some insight to come back to the town committee. So I ran last time, and I was a member of the town committee. And then when Roberto decided to run for mayor, he resigned as chair, and I became chair and will fill out his term. And I'm excited about it, and I think I have both the insight and the experience to generate some enthusiasm and bring the party back together again to win a municipal race. I think we're collectively together on the state and national level, but municipal races have been difficult for the party, and I think I can turn that around. That is my hope.
Now, you were a chairperson back in the day also when Democrats ruled the nest here. What do you feel are some of the differences between your first go around here at the town committee and what you see now?
So actually, I became town chairman at a time when Dyer had lost the election to Joe Sauer. The 20 members of the Democratic Town Committee, of the 28 of us, 20 had resigned. The party was in shambles. We had no money. No Democratic candidate running for office or in office would come to Danbury because of Dyer's indictment and trial. And we were at a difficult low. And that's the time that I took over the party. I believe I restored credibility and integrity back to the party, restored our good name statewide. We ran Jean Eriquez, who defeated Sauer after one term. So Jean beat a one-term incumbent. I'm looking forward to doing the same this time with Roberto, defeating Dean. And we then had control of the city during the Eriquez administration. I served 6 years the first time around, and then, like everything else, I believe it's time for new blood and new opportunities and new insight from new visionaries of the party, and I stepped down. This time around, I think my goal is to educate first as to why municipal races are important. Most people don't know that they're even in a ward, let alone who their city council representative is. Most people don't know names of members of the Board of Education or the zoning commission. And those are the elected offices, let alone the appointed boards and commissions in the town that do so much valuable work to make our town, or make our city effective. So the idea first is to educate people as to why they should turn out in a municipal race when they're turning out in the state and national races. If we get a higher turnout, I'm confident of greater success at the polls. So the first is to have people appreciate the meaning of city government and what it is that our candidates and our elected officials do. And then second is to raise awareness as to the positions that are available so that we recruit candidates that want to run for public office or serve on boards and commissions, because there are many that are appointed by the city council. And then, of course, to explain the differences between what we believe is the democratic philosophy of government and what the Republicans have been doing most recently. That takes money, so fundraising is a big part of that. That takes registering people to vote who otherwise might be interested but don't know the process, so we need to do some voter registration. And so there's room for people that want to join our party at any level. Issue research, knocking on doors, fundraising, candidate recruitment, and I'm enthusiastic about it. It's only March. People don't pay a lot of attention.
Right.
It's interesting, like it used to be people would say, only after Labor Day do people start paying attention to election and campaigns. And some people argue now that it's after the World Series that people start to pay attention. And on the municipal level, I would submit that most people don't pay attention. And so to me, it was very disheartening that after 20 years, there was going to be an open seat. And regardless of whether or not you were going to vote Republican or Democrat in the last mayor's race, for the first time in 20 years, we were going to have a new mayor. And yet, only 32% of those that are registered opted to vote that day. And that was very disheartening to me because democracy, in my judgment, will fail unless it's participatory democracy. We all need to participate. And although there's some that say, well, I looked at both candidates and I decided consciously not to vote, I think that's a cop-out. And so, again, I believe that if we raise the number of people that vote on election day from 32, which is shameful for any democracy, to 50%, even 40%, that the Democrats will have a good chance because we'll educate people and we'll get them to the polls and they'll vote for the Democratic candidates.
I always hear people talk about national stuff and like, this Trump, this, or these Democrats that on the news, and I saw this on CNN, I saw this on Fox, that the country's going crazy. I'm like, well, what ward do you live in? Who's your state representative? Who's your state senator?
Exactly.
Because if you want to make an effective change in your life on a government level, you have to start on the local government. That's where you are most effective. And in terms of your taxes, the taxes that you pay, the most impact you can have on your taxes, obviously, is on a local level.
That's correct. The city council, which votes on the budget every year, the Board of Education
has over 50% of your 50% of the budget goes towards the Board of Education.
and
you see there.
Right, and we all know that strong schools, regardless of party, regardless of affiliation, a strong school district increases property values, and increased property values is good for everyone in the community. So the local elected officials are actually more significant on your day-to-day life than a candidate's position on any of the national issues.
If you really want to make a change in the way of your life and in your children's life and in your quality of life, you got to get involved in your local government. You got to pay attention to what's going on the local level, because that's where you can make the big difference.
Now, and part of paying attention used to be easier, right? We had a newspaper that effectively had reporters that covered local news, city hall, zoning decisions, planning commission meetings, and those things that were important in the community. And now we don't have that. We have at best a regional paper, but there's no one that's specifically assigned to cover the day-to-day activities of what's going on in Danbury. I'm saddened by that. The same thing with the local news stations as well. Everything is going more regional, and it's more difficult then for people to get a single source of their news, which means we have to reach out. Thank people like you who are doing this every day, all the time, and posting and blogging and allowing people to learn firsthand what's happening. But we don't have that, unfortunately, any longer in the traditional old-fashioned press.
There was a time when I first started reporting on politics in Danbury. I had to go with my own camcorder down to City Hall and record the meetings because they weren't being recorded. Now you have a City Hall in which it's it's wired up, and you can see the meetings online. I think there's more accessibility
Absolutely.
to see your government in action. So you have more opportunities to see your government in action. But again, we just saw the low participation rate in the previous election, which leads me to my second question. What are you going to do to try to get that part up, the turnout up? Because I would assume it's it's somewhat of the responsibility of the town committee to get the people to understand the issues that are happening in this area. I think what did I hear? People usually say the candidates are supposed to go out there and give the message, and the town committee is supposed to draw the red meat, and get the message out there to the people.
The job of the town committee is administrative as well as policy, but administrative and detail oriented. It's the mechanics of running a campaign. It's getting people to knock on doors in the fall. It's getting people to hand out leaflets, to be at supermarkets and other places where people are congregating to be able to get out the message. So what is it that we're going to do differently? First, we're going to raise money, okay, at unprecedented rates, unfortunately, because you need money to get the message out. Secondly, we're going to recruit great candidates that want to run, because they're going to be enthusiastic about two things. One, the Democratic message, and also what they're seeing happening in City Hall. So it's reactionary as well. Third, we're going to use those state officials and state elected candidates who ran last time, who were successful and won, to energize the base. So those candidates that have been successful in the Democratic Party, the governor's already been to Danbury, Senator Murphy's coming to Danbury. We're going to bring those people that energize and support our team back to Danbury to say and to talk about the importance of municipal elections for all the reasons that we discussed. So it's a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of voter ID, lawn signs, door knocking, but it's the goal, the intent of that is to identify a message that differentiates itself from the current administration, and then to be successful on election day, which means a GOTV, get out the vote message as well, and bringing people to the polls. So I'm excited about it, and think we can do it.
One of the things you have to do to get people to come onto your brand is explain to them why voting for the Democratic Party, local Democratic Party, is the way to go, as opposed to what you've been doing for the last 2 decades. It's going with the Republican brand. How are you going to bring those unaffiliated voters who voted for Boughton in the last 2 decades, and Democrats who have voted for the mayor, to come on to the local Democratic brand? Why should they vote Democrat in this upcoming election?
First, we're going to talk about who we are as a party and who they're not. So the incumbent mayor likes to talk about all of the good things that happened in the city and how he was the chief of staff during the Boughton administration, and therefore needs to be complimented and commended for all of those things. But when something is not so good, like traffic and road paving and overdevelopment, then he likes to throw up his hands and say, well, I wasn't mayor during those 20 years, and so I can't be held accountable. So you can't have it both ways. You can't take credit for all the things that you want to take credit for and then wash your hands of those things. So we're going to talk about what it is that the Republicans are doing now. So the first opportunity in terms of wards was to reapportion the maps based on the census. The charter requires that there be a commission to generate the ward maps. That commission failed to do its job. The Republican town chairman, who was chairman of that commission, didn't present one map to the commission to study. The Democrats came up with a map, the Republicans dismissed it, wouldn't vote for it. It went back to the council, the supermajority on the council. They appointed an ad hoc committee to study it. All of a sudden, out of the blue, the Republicans come up with a map. And what they come up with was a racially gerrymandered map to keep them in power. It was a political and absolutely disgusting drawing of wards in this community. And the outrage at the next council meeting, not one person spoke in favor of the map. In fact, not one councilman spoke in favor of the map. Even the Republican town chairman who drew the map didn't speak in favor of the map. The city hired a demographer who said that the map was racially gerrymandered and couldn't stand muster. So they failed in their attempt at transparency, at open government, at letting the public be heard on the issue. And now they missed the deadline of March 1st, which the charter says you shall have a new map by March 1st. They don't. And it appears that what the Republicans now want to do is simply say, well, since we can't agree on anything, let's just use the current ward maps for this next election and figure it out afterwards, which again is an abdication of responsibility. And this theme about missing deadlines, lack of transparency, abdication of responsibility is throughout. So at the last city council meeting, when the mayor had the opportunity to allow the public to be heard on a homeless shelter, the mayor didn't let the motion fail on its own. The motion was, shall we have a public hearing on a new homeless shelter on Elm Street? 9 councilmen voted yes, and 9 councilmen voted no, which means that the motion fails. The mayor didn't have to do anything. The motion failed. However, the mayor wanted to go on record and vote no. He could have broken the tie to vote to say yes, allow for a public hearing. Instead, he voted no, almost proud to vote no. Proud to say, I don't want the public to be heard on this issue. I just want to shove it down your throats and move forward. So again, this consistent lack of transparency, lack of allowing the public to be heard, missing deadlines, is going to come back to haunt the Republicans in this election.